Welcome back to the channel, treasure hunters and history lovers. This is your home for unbelievable coin stories and hidden fortunes hiding in plain sight, and today we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about modern Lincoln cents ever. A humble-looking 1971 1-cent coin that under extremely rare circumstances has been whispered about in collector circles as being worth an astonishing $39 million, a number so high it almost sounds unreal, and yet when you begin to peel back the layers of minting history, human error, experimental metallurgy, and the wild world of numismatic anomalies, you start to understand how a simple penny from the early 1970s could ignite imaginations, fuel rumors, and create lifelong treasure hunts, because the story of the 1971 Lincoln cent isn't about one single mistake. It's about a perfect storm of possibilities: rare errors, transitional metal mysteries, die failures, off-metal strikes, planchet mix-ups, doubled impressions, wrong alloy compositions, experimental blanks, and undocumented anomalies that together form the foundation for why a single cent could theoretically reach a value normally reserved for priceless art and legendary relics. And to understand why collectors even whisper about a $40 million penny, we have to go back to the era itself, a time when the United States Mint was under intense pressure. Copper prices were volatile, production numbers were enormous, quality control was stretched thin, and subtle mistakes could slip through unnoticed, especially when millions upon millions of coins were being struck at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, each facility operating with slightly different equipment, dies, and tolerances, all while the Lincoln cent itself was in the middle of an identity crisis, because by 1971 the composition was officially copper-plated zinc, but experimental testing with different alloys had already taken place in surrounding years, and leftover planchets, rejected blanks, and test pieces were not always perfectly accounted for, creating the first massive possibility for extreme value, the wrong metal error. Because if a 1971 Lincoln cent were struck on a solid copper planchet intended for earlier years, or even more explosively, on an experimental alloy or a foreign metal blank that was never meant to exist in circulation, its weight, density, and electromagnetic signature would immediately set it apart, and history has already proven that wrong metal Lincoln cents can command astronomical sums, so when rumors circulate of a 1971 cent struck on an undocumented experimental bronze alloy or a transitional planchet accidentally left in the hoppers, collectors pay attention, especially when such a coin would represent not just a mint error but a missing chapter of U.S. mint experimentation, and that alone could elevate it into the stratosphere of numismatic value. But metal alone isn't the only doorway into the millions, because the dies used to strike coins in 1971 were pushed to their limits, reused beyond optimal lifespan, sometimes clashed violently with each other, sometimes cracked, sometimes broke apart entirely, and these failures could create dramatic visual errors, like massive retained cut breaks where a chunk of the die breaks off but remains attached, creating a ghostly raised blob of metal on the coin, or full-blown die breaks that distort Lincoln's portrait or obliterate lettering. And while minor die cracks are common, a spectacular catastrophic die failure combined with other errors on the same coin could be unique, a one-of-one survivor, and in numismatics, uniqueness is king, especially when combined with historical context and mystery, because a one-of-one error that should not exist but does, particularly from a heavily collected series like the Lincoln cent, becomes the kind of object wealthy collectors will fight over, and that's where valuations begin to leave reality behind and enter legend territory. But the rabbit hole goes deeper, because doubling errors in 1971 are another major factor, and not just ordinary machine doubling that adds little value, but true double dies created when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, producing strong, rounded, clearly separated doubling on letters, dates, and Lincoln's features. And while known double dies from other years are well documented, the possibility of an undiscovered, ultra-strong double die obverse or reverse from 1971, especially one affecting the date, the word liberty, or I in God we trust, could send shockwaves through the hobby. And if such a double die were combined with another major error, like a wrong planchet or an off-center strike, the resulting coin would transcend normal categories and become something almost mythical, a convergence error that challenges everything collectors think they know about minting controls. And speaking of off-center strikes, imagine a 1971 cent struck dramatically off-center while still retaining a full visible date and mint characteristics, but struck on the wrong metal, with doubling visible and a die break present, a Frankenstein of minting chaos that by all logic should not exist. Yet mint history shows us that when production volumes soar and oversight falters, impossible things sometimes happen, and when they do, they rewrite price guides, because collectors aren't just buying a coin. They're buying a story, a once-in-a-lifetime artifact of human and mechanical failure frozen in copper and zinc. And then there's the question of mint marks, because while Philadelphia cents from 1971 carry no mint mark, Denver cents have the D, and San Francisco cents were often struck with superior quality for proof and collector purposes, and a 1971 cent exhibiting a circulation-style strike with a proof-only die or vice versa would represent a stunning crossover error, especially if a proof die were used on a circulation planchet or a circulation die were mistakenly polished to proof-like standards and then used improperly, creating mirrored fields and frosted devices on a coin never meant to look that way, and if such a coin escaped into circulation rather than being destroyed, it would represent a breach in mint protocol so severe that it would become legendary, and legends command premium prices, especially when documentation is scarce or non-existent, because the lack of official explanation fuels speculation, debate, and desire. And that brings us to another possibility, the existence of a 1971 cent struck on a foreign planchet, because U.S. mints often produced coins for other nations, and blanks for foreign currencies could be present in the same facilities, and if a Lincoln cent were struck on a planchet intended for another country, the resulting weight, thickness, and appearance would be unmistakable, and if that foreign planchet were made of a precious or semi-precious metal, or a composition no longer used anywhere else, the coin would become an international anomaly, bridging two monetary systems in a single accidental strike, and such crossover errors have historically sold for enormous sums, but the $1 million threshold is usually crossed only when rarity meets intrigue meets condition. And condition is another critical element in the $39 million rumor, because a coin can be rare, but if it's damaged or worn, its value collapses, whereas a pristine, mint-state example with blazing original surfaces, sharp details, and untouched luster becomes exponentially more valuable, especially if it's the only known example, and when you combine top-tier condition with a multi-layered error, you enter a valuation realm where traditional price guides are meaningless, and negotiation happens behind closed doors between elite collectors, auction houses, and museums, sometimes resulting in private sales that never become public knowledge, which only fuels rumors of staggering prices paid quietly. And another factor often overlooked is the possibility of mule errors, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as an obverse from one year and a reverse from another, or a Lincoln cent obverse paired with a reverse never intended for it. And while known mules exist, a 1971 mule involving an experimental or transitional reverse design could represent an undocumented trial that escaped destruction, and the mint has a long history of experimental strikes that were supposed to be melted but occasionally slipped through the cracks, and when such pieces surface decades later, they become time capsules of abandoned ideas, and those are the kinds of coins that can command museum-level interest and valuations that defy logic. And we can't ignore the human element either, because mint employees were human, and sometimes curiosity, carelessness, or even deliberate pocketing played a role in unusual coins leaving the facility, and while official records may deny it, history suggests that not every error was accidental, and not every experimental piece was accounted for, and when such a coin surfaces generations later with no paper trail, it becomes the ultimate mystery coin, the kind that inspires books, documentaries, and bidding wars. And all of these factors converge when people talk about a 1971 1 cent worth $39 million, because it's not about a normal penny. Next. 1975, D1 cent today, because what we're about to dive into is one of those stories that perfectly captures why coin collecting is filled with mystery, hidden fortune, and unbelievable possibilities, and today we're talking about a single humble Lincoln 1 cent coin from 1975 with a D mint mark that, under the right circumstances, has been rumored and speculated to command a jaw-dropping value of up to $23 million, and if that sounds impossible for a penny you might casually toss into a jar or ignore on the sidewalk, stay with me because by the end of this deep exploration you'll understand exactly how tiny errors, overlooked mistakes, and rare combinations of circumstances can transform a common copper coin into one of the most valuable numismatic treasures imaginable, and it all starts with understanding the historical background of the 1975 D1 cent. Because context is everything when it comes to rarity and value, the year 1975 was a fascinating time in American coinage history. The United States Mint was operating at massive production levels to keep up with circulation demand. Denver was striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents using copper alloy planchets composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a composition that would soon change in the early 1980s. Meaning 1975 sits at a crossroads between old and modern minting eras, and with that enormous output came speed, pressure, and inevitable human and mechanical errors. Most 1975 D pennies are worth just 1 cent or a few cents in uncirculated condition, but buried among those millions are anomalies so rare that they defy normal valuation logic. One of the most talked about possibilities involves dramatic mint errors such as off-metal strikes, where a penny is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin. Imagine a 1975 D Lincoln cent struck on a bronze planchet of a different thickness or composition, or more Sensationally on a silver or clad planchet, such errors are extraordinarily rare because quality control is designed to catch them, but history proves they sometimes slip through, and when they do the numismatic world takes notice, because an authenticated off-metal 1975 D-cent would instantly become one of the most important modern error coins known, pushing its value into the millions due to uniqueness and collector demand. Another massive value driver comes from double die errors. Particularly doubled dies on the obverse or reverse, where the coin design shows noticeable doubling due to misalignment during the hubbing process, while minor doubling is known on various dates. A bold and dramatic double die for a 1975 D-cent, especially one showing strong separation on the date, Liberty, or I in God We Trust, would be a once-in-a-generation discovery. Collectors pay enormous premiums for visually striking double dies, and when combined with a high-grade state and Denver mint attribution, such a coin could redefine price records. Then there are wrong planchet errors tied to experimental metals, a topic that fuels speculation around ultra-high valuations like the $23 million figure often discussed. During the 1970s the mint was constantly testing alloys and planchets, and while most experimental pieces were destroyed, the possibility remains that a 1975 D-cent could have been struck on an experimental or transitional planchet not intended for circulation, similar to how the 1943 bronze cent and 1944 steel cent became legendary. A 1975 D-cent struck on an unapproved or undocumented alloy would be the modern equivalent of those historic errors, and collectors and museums would compete fiercely to own it, driving the price into stratospheric territory. Another error category that contributes to this coin's legendary potential is the missing mint mark misconception. While Denver coins normally carry a D, there have been instances in other years where grease-filled dies or weak strikes caused the mint mark to be completely absent. A 1975 cent that appears to lack a mint mark but can be conclusively traced to Denver through die markers would be extremely intriguing, especially if combined with other errors, because layered mistakes exponentially increase rarity. Then we move into major strike anomalies like broad strikes, where the coin is struck without a retaining collar causing it to spread out wider than normal, or double strikes where the coin receives multiple impressions. A dramatically misaligned double strike on a 1975 D-cent with full detail could command enormous interest, especially if preserved in mint state condition, and condition is crucial because error coins that survive without damage are far rarer than those that circulate heavily. The market pays for preservation just as much as rarity. Another fascinating angle involves die cracks, cuds, and retained cuds, where parts of the die break off and leave raised blobs of metal on the coin. Next. 1979 1 cent today, because what you are about to hear sounds like a fantasy, a rumor, or one of those stories people laugh at until they realize the details are real, because today we are diving deep into the unbelievable legend of the 1979 1 cent coin, a penny that most people have seen, spent, ignored, or even tossed into a jar, yet under very specific circumstances has been whispered about in the numismatic world as being worth as much as $13 million, and that shocking valuation does not come from gold content or age alone but from a perfect storm of rare minting errors, transitional mistakes, production anomalies, historical timing, survival rates, collector demand, and the fascinating human errors that happen behind the walls of the United States Mint. And as you listen closely you may start thinking differently about every penny you have ever held, because the 1979 Lincoln cent sits at the crossroads of one of the most confusing and error-prone periods in modern U.S. coinage history, a time when metal compositions were changing, dies were being reused, quality control was overwhelmed, and mistakes slipped through that today fuel some of the most valuable modern coin discoveries ever recorded. So let us settle in and explore how an ordinary copper-colored coin from 1979 could become one of the most valuable small-denomination coins on Earth, beginning with the context of the year itself, because 1979 was not just another year for the penny, it was part of a transitional decade following the 1973 to 1974 copper crisis, when the United States Mint permanently altered the composition of the Lincoln cent from nearly pure copper to a copper-plated zinc core, a change that created endless confusion on the production floor. As old copper planchets still existed in storage, experimental blanks circulated quietly through testing channels, and mint workers were forced to strike billions of coins at breakneck speed to meet demand, and when speed meets complexity, errors are inevitable. And the 1979 penny exists right in the danger zone where composition mistakes, off-metal strikes, wrong planchets, double dies, misaligned hubs, and die deterioration all converged, starting with the most famous and valuable error possibility of them all, the 1979 penny struck on a pre-1982 bronze planchet or on a foreign or experimental planchet, because while the official composition in 1979 was a zinc core with copper plating weighing 2.5 grams, there is Strong evidence that small numbers of older bronze planchets weighing around 3.11 grams remained in mint facilities, and if a 1979 dated die struck one of those bronze blanks, the result would be a transitional wrong planchet error of extraordinary rarity, especially if authenticated. And such coins are the holy grails of modern Lincoln cent collecting because they represent a mistake that technically should not exist, and when something that should not exist does exist, collectors assign enormous value, particularly when the coin survives in high mint state condition, because survival rates for such errors are microscopic, often fewer than a handful known or even suspected, and when collectors speculate about a $13,001,979 penny, they are often envisioning a perfect storm. Example, a 1979 cent struck on a bronze planchet, fully uncirculated, sharp strike, original surfaces, certified by a top grading service, and tied to a documented discovery story, because stories matter in numismatics as much as metal and numbers, and that is only one path to massive value, because another possibility that fuels the legend of the $13,001,979 penny involves off-metal strikes on aluminum, steel, or experimental alloy planchets. As during the late 1970s the mint continued testing alternative metals for the cent due to rising costs, including aluminum alloys that never officially entered circulation but did exist within mint laboratories and production facilities, and if a 1979 Lincoln cent die struck one of these experimental blanks, the resulting coin would be a numismatic unicorn, because aluminum cents are already controversial and restricted, yet their existence is proven through 1974 aluminum cents, and any later date aluminum strike would ignite legal, historical, and collector frenzy, driving values into the millions not because of face value but because of uniqueness and forbidden status. And then there is the category of dramatic die errors that transform a common date into a treasure, including doubled dies where the design appears doubled due to misalignment during the hubbing process, and while most people think of famous doubled dies like the 1955 or 1972, there are lesser-known doubled dies from the late 1970s that remain undiscovered or underreported, and a major 1979 doubled die obverse or reverse with strong, naked eye doubling on Lincoln's portrait, the date, or inscriptions like Liberty or I and God We Trust could redefine the market overnight, because rarity combined with dramatic visual appeal creates explosive demand, especially when collectors realize they may have overlooked such coins for decades, and that is where the story becomes even more compelling, because the 1979 penny was minted in massive numbers at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, meaning billions of opportunities for errors to occur, but also billions of coins for people to casually ignore, meaning some of the greatest errors may still be hiding in collections, jars, or inherited accumulations, untouched and unrecognized, and beyond double dies there are wrong mint mark errors, repunched mint marks, and missing mint mark anomalies that collectors analyze obsessively, especially in the late 1970s when mint mark punches were still manually applied, creating opportunities for overpunching, misplacement, or omission. And while a small mint mark variety alone might not reach millions, when combined with other factors like off-metal strikes or major die errors, the value can multiply exponentially. And then there is the realm of spectacular strike errors such as broad strikes, off-center strikes, and multiple strikes, where the coin was struck more than once, sometimes rotated, sometimes with partial designs overlapping, creating chaotic yet beautiful pieces that show the violence and imperfection of industrial minting. And while many such errors exist, only the most extreme, dramatic, and preserved examples ascend into the million-dollar conversation, particularly when paired with the mystique of the 1979 date and its transitional context, and we cannot overlook die clashes and retained cut errors either, where broken dies leave raised blobs of metal on the coin, sometimes altering Lincoln's portrait or creating surreal shapes that defy expectation, and again while most are modestly valued, a massive retained cut combined with other anomalies could push a coin into legendary status. And the value discussion does not stop at physical errors alone, because provenance plays a critical role, as a 1979 penny discovered in a sealed mint bag, government storage, or accompanied by credible documentation gains a narrative that collectors crave, and narratives drive auctions into bidding wars where logic yields to desire, and that is how values spiral from thousands to millions, especially when only one example is known, because uniqueness is the ultimate currency in collecting, and when a single coin stands alone it becomes priceless to the right buyer. And that brings us to the psychology behind the $13 million valuation, because no coin is inherently worth $13 million unless someone is willing to pay it, and in the world of elite collectors, museums, and private investors, competition is fierce, egos are large, and owning the only known example of a forbidden or impossible coin becomes a status symbol beyond money. And when two or more such collectors collide at auction, prices can soar into numbers that shock the public, and the Lincoln cent, humble as it is, carries immense cultural weight because it represents American history, everyday life, and the idea that treasure can hide in plain sight, and that symbolism adds emotional value that no spreadsheet can calculate. And we also need to talk about condition because condition is everything. As an error coin worn down by circulation loses much of its appeal, while a pristine mint state example with blazing luster and untouched surfaces becomes exponentially more valuable, and when people speculate about a $13,001,979 penny they are imagining perfection, a coin that looks as though it was struck moments ago, preserved against all odds, because high-grade survivors of error coins are far rarer than the errors themselves. And then there is the role of professional grading and authentication, because without certification from a respected grading service even the most spectacular coin remains a curiosity rather than an investment, and certification transforms mystery into legitimacy, unlocking the global collector market, and the moment a coin is slabbed, photographed, and published the race begins, because knowledge spreads quickly in numismatics and discoveries do not stay secret for long. And that is why some believe the ultimate 1979 penny has not yet surfaced, because once it does the news will ripple through the hobby instantly, and until then the legend grows, fueled by speculation, partial discoveries, and the knowledge that other impossible coins have surfaced before, such as the 1943 copper cent and the 1944 steel cent, both of which were once considered myths until they were proven real and sold for staggering sums, and history teaches collectors that today's myth can become tomorrow's headline. And the 1979 penny fits that pattern perfectly, sitting at the edge of plausibility, supported by known mint practices, transitional chaos, and human error. And then there is the role of hoarding and attrition, because most pennies are lost, melted, or damaged over time, meaning the survival pool shrinks every year, and as fewer high-quality examples remain the pressure on values increases, especially for coins already deemed rare. And when combined with rising interest in modern era coins among younger collectors, driven by online communities, social media, and viral discovery stories, demand continues to grow, pushing theoretical values higher, and $13 million becomes less absurd when you consider that art last. Today we are going to explore a truly extraordinary and almost mythical piece of American numismatic history, the 1974 1-cent coin, a coin that despite its humble face value of just 1 cent has captivated collectors and investors around the world because of the unique errors and mistakes that make it potentially worth an astonishing $9 million, a value that seems almost unimaginable for a coin that most people would casually toss into a jar or use to pay for a cup of coffee, and yet, within the careful study of coin collectors and the intricate world of minting processes, every detail, every anomaly, and every imperfection can drastically elevate a coin's value, creating a blend of historical intrigue, scientific curiosity, and financial excitement that few other collectibles can rival. And so the 1974 1-cent coin stands as a shining example of how mistakes can transform ordinary items into objects of extraordinary desire, beginning with its striking errors, which include what experts identify as die cracks, off-center strikes, double dies, and planchet anomalies, each of which tells a story not just of mechanical missteps at the U.S. Mint but also of a moment frozen in time when human oversight, machine wear, and material inconsistencies combine to produce a coin that is simultaneously flawed and flawless in its rarity, starting with the die cracks, which occur when the metal die used to strike the coin develops fissures due to repeated use or imperfect metal composition, causing raised lines or irregularities to appear across the coin's surface, making each specimen with this type of error unique and highly sought after, as collectors can trace the pattern of cracks and often identify the particular die used, giving each coin a fingerprint-like individuality that no perfectly struck coin can replicate. And then there are off-center strikes, a dramatic error that occurs when the coin blank, or planchet, is misaligned in the coining press, resulting in part of the design being cropped or missing entirely, which not only affects the visual appeal but also dramatically reduces the number of coins that show the complete misalignment, thus amplifying rarity and desirability. And in the case of the 1974 penny, a certain small fraction of coins were struck significantly off-center, creating specimens that collectors recognize as museum-quality oddities, while double die errors, perhaps among the most famous and historically celebrated mistakes in numismatics, occur when the die itself is improperly prepared, leading to a duplication or shadowing of the coin's design elements, most often visible in the date, the lettering, or Lincoln's portrait on the obverse, which not only creates a visually striking coin but also allows numismatists to trace the specific stage at which the minting process went awry, a form of mechanical storytelling that brings a sense of excitement and adventure to the search for such coins, and we cannot overlook The planchet anomalies, which include improperly prepared metal blanks, clipped planchets, lamination flaws, or impurities in the copper zinc composition, which can cause unusual coloring, bubbling, or surface irregularities that transform a coin from a simple circulation piece into a marvel of accidental artistry. And the 1974 1-cent coin is particularly famous for exhibiting a rare combination of these errors in certain surviving specimens, making them the subject of intense scrutiny. Cataloging and auction activity. As collectors and investors alike recognize that the coin's market value is fueled not just by the face value or the age of the coin, but by the documented occurrence of these rare mistakes, their condition, and the verified provenance that accompanies each piece, with coins graded in higher conditions commanding astronomical prices, sometimes surpassing the multi-million-dollar mark when offered in specialized auctions attended by global buyers, and the allure of such a coin extends beyond monetary considerations, as it embodies the story of American minting practices in the 1970s, a period of transition and experimentation where the U.S. Mint was expanding production capacity, updating machinery, and simultaneously grappling with quality control issues, all of which contributed to the creation of these unusual errors, making the 1974 1-cent not just a coin but a historical artifact that represents a specific moment in industrial and economic history, providing insight into the metallurgy, design, and production pressures of the time, while also sparking passionate debates among collectors regarding authenticity, rarity, and the comparative value of similar errors from adjacent years, as the subtle differences in die patterns, mint marks, and planchet composition can lead to dramatic differences in the final valuation, requiring a meticulous eye and often the assistance of third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC to certify the coin and provide an official assessment of its condition, error type, and potential market worth. And speaking of market worth, the $9 million figure attributed to certain high-grade, well-documented 1974 1-cent specimens comes not from casual speculation but from historical auction results, private sales, and expert appraisals that factor in rarity, condition, collector demand, and the documented presence of major errors, where a coin that is impeccably preserved with dramatic die doubling, a significant off-center strike, and a flawless planchet can reach astronomical levels at auction, sometimes attracting competitive bidding that drives prices well beyond traditional expectations. And part of what makes the 1974 1-center Southwest fascinating is that while some errors are relatively common and thus moderately valuable, the specific combinations found in the most coveted coins are extraordinarily rare, and this scarcity, coupled with the story each coin tells, creates an irresistible allure for serious numismatists, professional investors, and casual enthusiasts alike, who are drawn not just by the potential financial upside but by the thrill of owning a tangible piece of history that embodies both human error and mechanical imperfection, while also serving as a reminder of the unpredictability inherent in minting processes, as even the most rigorously controlled operations can produce mistakes that, decades later, transform ordinary pennies into objects of immense cultural and economic significance. And in examining the specific errors on the 1974 1-cent, one finds that some coins exhibit what experts call hub doubling, a type of double die error where the original hub impression was misaligned during the die creation process, resulting in a subtle yet discernible doubling of lettering or numerals, a flaw so delicate that it often requires magnification to detect. Yet once confirmed, it can elevate a coin's status exponentially within collector circles, while other specimens show pronounced off-center strikes exceeding 25%, sometimes cropping Lincoln's profile entirely from the coin's edge, which creates a striking and dramatic visual effect that immediately signals rarity and draws premium interest at auctions. And then there are the rare instances of clipped planchets, where a portion of the coin's metal is missing due to an irregularly cut blank, often combined with planchet lamination issues, which can cause peeling or flaking of the surface, producing a coin that is not only extremely rare but also visually unique, a feature that many collectors prize as it guarantees that no two examples are alike, reinforcing the coin's singularity in a market where uniqueness is synonymous with value. And beyond these physical characteristics, provenance also plays a critical role in the 1974 1-cent market performance, as coins that can be traced to early collections, certified mint sets, or historically documented hoards gain additional prestige, with auction houses carefully verifying chain of custody and authenticity to reassure buyers that the coin represents a legitimate, verifiable error, which in turn allows these coins to command prices that reach into the millions, reflecting not just the tangible characteristics of the coin but also the intangible trust and history it carries. And collectors often note that market trends for these error coins are influenced by both numismatic scholarship and the broader investment climate, as awareness of rare errors grows through publications, online forums, and media coverage, creating heightened demand and competitive bidding environments that can dramatically inflate prices, while at the same time, grading standards, discovery of previously unknown specimens, and technological advances in coin authentication continue to shape perceptions of rarity and value, making the market for 1974 1-cent coins a dynamic intersection of history, science, and economics. And it is this multifaceted appeal, historical significance, mechanical curiosity, aesthetic uniqueness, and investment potential that drives collectors to seek out the 1974 1-cent, often meticulously examining hundreds of ordinary pennies to uncover the few extraordinary examples that embody the remarkable eras discussed, while also cultivating a sense of excitement and adventure akin to treasure hunting, as each coin carries the possibility of a life-changing discovery, especially when the errors include combinations that are exceedingly rare, such as major off-center strikes combined with pronounced die doubling and flawless planchet surfaces, a trifecta of anomalies that can catapult a coin into the realm of multi-million-dollar valuation, capturing the imagination of collectors worldwide, and even within the community of numismatists. The 1974 1-cent has achieved near-mythical status, with stories of coins found in circulation, long-forgotten drawers, or inherited from previous generations fueling dreams of sudden wealth and historical discovery, while serious collectors invest significant time, resources, and expertise to identify, authenticate, and acquire these coins, knowing that even small differences in error manifestation, strike quality, or preservation can translate into enormous financial and historical significance, and the process of collecting such coins involves careful study of minting records, die varieties, metal compositions, and auction histories, with the 1974 1-cent serving as a particularly rich case study due to the unusual number and combination of errors that appeared that year, and this combination of rarity, historical interest, and dramatic visual features makes it a coin that not only fascinates collectors but also attracts broader attention from the general public, numismatic writers, and media outlets interested in the stories behind rare and valuable coins, as each specimen tells a unique story of production, oversight, and chance, transforming a simple 1-cent coin into a symbol of both human imperfection and mechanical precision, while also illustrating broader themes in economics, history, and culture, such as the relationship between scarcity and value, the role of human error in the creation of collectible artifacts, and the way in which material objects can acquire meaning far beyond their original intent.